In 1984, a century-old tradition in British football quietly flatlined. The British Home Championship, the annual mini-league of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, was discontinued after England and Scotland pulled out, citing waning interest, an overloaded fixture list, and a sharp rise in hooliganism. Because nothing spices up a friendly tournament like the constant threat of getting your head kicked in. Wales and Northern Ireland were not amused. After all, it was the only bit of silverware they had any realistic chance of ever winning. But the two bigger FAs had made their minds up. The oldest rivalry in world football, England versus Scotland, was too popular to bin entirely. After all, 84,000 fans had packed Wembley for it in 1983, more than all the other home championship games that year combined. So the powers that be cooked up a new plan. Keep the England-Scotland showdown, throw a fancy name on it, and call it a tournament. Enter the Rous Cup. Named after Sir Stanley Rous, the Rous Cup was launched in 1985 as essentially a one-match competition. England and Scotland would play each other for a trophy each year, alternating home advantage. After all, why go through all the hassle of qualifying for the World Cup or the Euros when there's a perfectly good trophy waiting at home? Hang on a minute, did they just steal the Wimbledon trophy? The idea wasn't completely silly. Rugby has its very own Calcutta Cup, cricket has the Ashes. As well as this, the intention was to preserve the England-Scotland rivalry and down the line allow for more sterner opponents to enter. It sounded kind of reasonable on paper, or the back of a packet of Benson and Hedges. In practice, though, it quickly became a showcase of 1980s football absurdity. The inaugural Rous Cup in 1985 got off to an auspicious start. Originally slated for Wembley, the England vs Scotland match was hastily moved to Hampden Park in Glasgow after the British government panicked about a bank holiday weekend invasion of rowdy fans in London, because of all the hooligans. Scottish fans were livid at losing a trip to Wembley, which I can't quite understand because there wasn't even a box park there yet. This move was all for nothing though, because instead of fighting in London, clashes between supporters broke out on trains before the game even started. As for the match itself, well, it was a grim affair. Scotland edged a 1-0 win to claim the first Rous Cup, courtesy of a Richard Gough header. But the action on the pitch was largely forgettable amid the torrential rain. The Times, in its report, noted, "The weather was constantly foul, the chants were often obscene, and the violence at times was sickening." And that was before the game even kicked off. Even Archie McPherson couldn't hold back his negativity.
In a scene that's rather dismal, unfortunately, very disappointing.
Oh, come on Archie, the bagpipes weren't that bad. So, after year one, the Rous Cup scoreline read Scotland 1, England 0. Enthusiasm? Maybe like a -10. The show went on in 1986 with the roles reversed, England hosting Scotland at Wembley. To accommodate both teams' preparations for the upcoming World Cup in Mexico, the match was played on a Wednesday night in late April, St George's Day, which I'm sure the Scots were thrilled about. Then again, the English probably didn't even realise. It turns out midweek scheduling and live TV coverage are a good recipe for killing attendance. Barely 68,000 showed up, the lowest England-Scotland crowd at Wembley since 1924. Those who did bother to show up witnessed England gain a bit of revenge with a 2-1 victory, restoring a sense of balance in this funny little cup. Yet, the contest felt like an afterthought. Many star players were missing, either injured or kept out to avoid risk before the World Cup, and even a midweek slot didn't prevent the now traditional pre-match fighting amongst sections of supporters. England lifted the Rous Trophy, no open-top bus parade mind. The novelty of a one-game tournament was already wearing thin. Facing diminishing interest and still eager for that stronger opposition, the England and Scottish FAs decided to spice up the Rous Cup in 1987. In an inspired, or desperate move, they invited a guest team. Brazil! Brazil! As FA Secretary Ted Croker explained, "We can think of no more suitable opposition to join England and Scotland than Brazil." And for once, everyone agreed. Brazil's presence promised a bit of glamour, even if some of their stars couldn't be bothered showing up. The format expanded to a 3-team round-robin league, each team playing 2 matches. At last, the Rous Cup looks like a real tournament, at least in theory. The hype for Brazil was all too real. England's opening match against the Brazilians drew a crowd of 92,000 to Wembley. Even England's favourite Argentinian showed up, presumably to do some PR rounds. The visitors, true to reputation, brought style and flair, and in true English fashion, the hosts managed a 1-1 draw, with Gary Lineker scoring for England before Brazil equalised. It was a lively start and gave hope that the Rous Cup's new look might succeed. But then came the next fixture, Scotland versus England at Hampton, sans Lineker, who had jetted back to Barcelona for a club match against Real Madrid, underscoring the tournament's place in the pecking order. What followed was a drab 0-0 stalemate. The Sunday Express wrote, "This traditional Anglo-Scottish confrontation that used to throb with passion and pride was no more than a twitching corpse. You could market the first half as a perfect cure for insomnia." Quite an achievement for the world's oldest international derby. With both British sides drawing, the 1987 Cup came down to Scotland versus Brazil in Glasgow, a winner takes all, which must have felt vaguely surreal for the Scots. Any hopes of a heroic upset were quickly dashed as Brazil's second-string side eased to a 2-0 victory. The South Americans politely accepted the silverware and presumably carried it back to Rio in a Tesco bag for life. Tellingly, Brazil didn't bother coming back to defend their prestigious title the next year, which is a real WCW move if I've ever seen one. Still, for the record, 1987 proved that England and Scotland could get their wish to play a top-class team. They just had to watch that team stroll off with the cup. After Brazil, the organisers aimed even higher for 1988. Their first choice of guest was Argentina, which certainly would have been a headline grabber, except the British government swiftly vetoed the idea. The Falklands War of 1982 was still a raw memory, and inviting Argentina for a friendly kickabout was a political no-go. Plan B was less provocative but also less exciting: Colombia. If the Brazilian samba had packed Wembley, the Colombian team, despite the hair, did not capture the public's imagination. The attendance numbers told the story. Only 20,000 showed up in Glasgow to watch Scotland draw 0-0 with Colombia, and about 25,000 in London witnessed England scrape a 1-1 draw with the South Americans. It was starting to look like the magic was fading, if it was ever there to begin with. On the pitch, England beat Scotland 1-0, but hardly anyone noticed amidst the apathy and the other England-Scotland contest taking place in the stands. There were an estimated 230 arrests and 90 injuries in violent clashes in and around Wembley. The newspapers were filled not with match reports, but with images of bloodied fans and police horses with their funny little safety visors on. Political commentators publicly pondered whether the fixture was worthwhile anymore, with the Minister for Sport, Colin Moynihan, stating, "I feel that, until we can ensure effective segregation, I don't believe the England versus Scotland fixture can remain." Heads up, Colin. At least it can't get any worse. Right? It won't? Despite all the warning signs, the Rous Cup limped into 1989 for a 5th edition, perhaps out of sheer inertia. The FAs initially invited Argentina, again, and Spain, but after witnessing last year's Battle Royale, both teams politely declined. So, the FA settled on another South American guest, this time Chile. On paper, Chile in 1989 was an odd choice. Not a huge draw for fans and politically awkward. In any case, Chile accepted the invite, presumably hearing from Colombia and Brazil how much of a laugh they had. The outcome was as good as could be expected, and the expectations were in the bin. England's game against Chile at Wembley only drew 15,500 fans, while the Scotland vs Chile match in Glasgow drew an abysmal crowd of just 9,006 diehards. Hampden Park's vast terraces looking like the aftermath of a fire drill. By now, the only fixture that mattered was the annual bash at the terraces between fans, Significant numbers of English fans travelled north, spoiling for trouble. Glasgow witnessed major disturbances and running battles between rival hooligan gangs, requiring a massive police intervention. By the end of the day, around 260 arrests had been made and countless more skirmishes had been dispersed. Amid this chaos, England did manage a 2-0 win on the field. Goals from Chris Waddle and Steve Ball secured victory, but few were in the mood to celebrate. Any remaining innocence of the old rivalry had been well and truly lost. For the tournament organisers and authorities, 1989 was the final straw. With English clubs already banned from European competitions after Heysel, and the national team under scrutiny for fan behaviour, the Football Association feared that England v Scotland had become an international embarrassment. And so, with a whimper rather than a bang, the competition was scrapped after 1989. The oldest rivalry in football was shelved. The Rous Cup trophy, one imagines, was tucked away in some FA storeroom, collecting dust alongside boxes of Steve McLaren merchandise and DVDs of David Seaman's Jeepers Keepers. Thus ended the brief and curious life of the Rous Cup. Born from the ashes of the home championship, it promised a new era of competitive, yet friendly rivalry and world-class opposition. Instead, it delivered sparse crowds, goalless draws, political complications, and a yearly helping of football hooliganism on the 6 o'clock news. There were indeed moments of interest. The novelty of Brazil's visit, England and Scotland actually winning something, Carlos Valderrama's hair. Ultimately, the Rous Cup failed to find a real purpose. It wasn't a major trophy, it wasn't a beloved tradition, and, as it turned out, it wasn't even safe to host. In hindsight, the whole saga carries a certain dry irony. England and Scotland thought they could improve on a 100-year-old tournament by downsizing it, only to watch their improvement implode within 5 years. So here's to the Rous Cup, 1985 to 1989. A competition born from optimism, ended by reality, and I mean fans. No, I mean